Chapter 1. The First Encounter. The day had started like any other for me, another routine repair job. Another long walk through the harsh streets of this decimated city, the lingering scent of fuel and burnt metal in the air, and the constant hum of the machines that powered the metropolis. But nothing could have prepared me for what I would find that afternoon as I trudged through the alleyways near the industrial district. It was a part of the city I rarely visited, a section marked by the debris of war and the remnants of human activity that had long since passed into memory. The alley was a maze of rusting scraps and forgotten technology, old pipes, and discarded machinery that told the story of a world that had once been whole but now stood in ruin. Overhead, the sun was obscured by a blanket of smog, its light filtering through the haze like a ghostly presence, offering little warmth to the cold streets below. My boots crunched over gravel and broken concrete as I walked, the noise echoing off the tall, dilapidated buildings that lined the path. It was a place where most people didn't linger, a place where you could disappear without anyone ever noticing. I had almost passed by when I saw her. She was sitting in the dirt, a small figure hunched in on herself, wrapped in a tattered cloak that was far too big for her tiny frame. Her face was streaked with grime and tears, and her eyes, wide and fearful, darted around as if expecting someone or something to pounce on her. She was so small, so fragile-looking, that it was hard to imagine her surviving in this harsh world on her own. The stuffed animal she held tightly to her chest, its fur matted with dirt, was the only sign that she was once loved, once cared for, perhaps by parents who had been lost in the chaos of the past. Her hands were trembling as she clutched it, and despite the layers of grime covering her body, she was trembling too. I stopped in my tracks. I had seen many things in my years: desperate faces, broken people, the wreckage of war, but this was different. There was something about her that pulled at me, a quiet desperation that I couldn't ignore. She was a child, and no child should be left alone in a world like this. My mind raced through the possibilities. Could she be part of one of the abandoned orphan groups? A runaway? Had someone tried to take advantage of her? The city had a way of swallowing people up, especially those who were vulnerable, and it didn't care who they were. For a moment, I hesitated. I wasn't supposed to get involved. People like me, mechanics, were supposed to fix things, not take responsibility for every stray or helpless soul we encountered. The streets were dangerous, and the risks of helping someone, especially someone like her, were high. But then I saw the fear in her eyes, the way she instinctively shrank back from me as if I might hurt her, and something inside me cracked. I knelt down, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible, keeping my hands visible and my voice calm. "Hey, little one, are you okay?" I asked gently. My voice felt strange in the silence, foreign to me, and I cursed myself for not being more careful. I wasn't used to talking to kids, let alone trying to comfort one in a place like this. The girl looked at me, her eyes wide with mistrust. But there was something else there too, something that made me think she was more used to being ignored or avoided than actually spoken to. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words never came out. Instead, she let out a small sob, her shoulders shaking with the weight of emotions that seemed too heavy for someone her age. She looked down at the ground, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't a social worker or a child's guardian. Hell, I could barely take care of myself in this crumbling city. But I couldn't just leave her there. I had to do something. So, I extended my hand toward her, the motion slow and deliberate, trying to show her that I wasn't a threat. She hesitated for a long moment, eyeing my hand suspiciously, before finally, with a slight tremor in her tiny fingers, she reached out and grasped it. "Do you have a name?" I asked softly, though I wasn't sure why I was asking. It seemed like a pointless question in the grand scheme of things, but it was the only thing that came to mind at the time. She shook her head, the movement so small I almost didn't notice it. Her gaze flickered toward the stuffed animal she still clutched tightly in her arms, as if it were her only connection to the past. "I'll call you Luna," I said, not waiting for her to respond. There was something about the way the light from the alley caught her eyes, something that reminded me of the moon, pale and far away, but still shining in the darkness. "Luna," she repeated softly, the word barely a whisper. It was the first time I had heard her speak, and I could hear the faintest trace of relief in her voice, like she had been waiting for someone to acknowledge her, even if just for a moment. Without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out the small ration pack I had on me. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. She looked at it, her eyes widening slightly, and I could see the hesitation in her face, whether from distrust or uncertainty. I couldn't say. I opened the pack slowly, showing her the contents, and offered it to her. Luna didn't hesitate this time. She reached out with both hands, her fingers trembling as she tore open the wrapper and shoved the food into her mouth. I watched her eat, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction in the simple act of giving. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was more than anyone else had given her, I imagined. I didn't know how long she'd been out here, but I could see the relief in her eyes as she devoured the food, the hunger fading from her features with each bite. When she had finished, I reached into my pack again, pulling out a small blanket I had tucked away for emergencies. "You should rest," I said, offering it to her. "It's not much, but it'll keep you warm for a while." Luna nodded quietly, her shoulders still hunched with weariness, but she accepted the blanket and wrapped it around herself. Her eyes fluttered closed, and for the first time since I had found her, she looked peaceful, almost serene, as if the weight of the world had momentarily lifted off her shoulders. I sat beside her for a while, watching the world go by in silence, the steady hum of the city the only sound. I wasn't sure what I was doing, whether I was being a fool for getting involved, or if I was actually helping. But in that moment, as Luna rested beside me, I didn't care. I had made a decision, and for once, it felt like the right one. Eventually, I rose to my feet, casting a final glance at the little girl who had somehow captured my attention in a way I didn't fully understand. "I'll be back tomorrow," I said, more to myself than to her. "I'll bring more food, more supplies." I wasn't sure if she could even hear me, but I felt a strange compulsion to keep my promise, to make sure she wasn't alone when she woke up. And with that, I turned and left the alley, my mind buzzing with questions I didn't have answers to. What had happened to her family? Was she part of the war refugees, displaced by the endless battles that had ravaged the planet? Where would she go next? For the first time in a long while, I found myself hoping that Luna would be safe, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I could do something to help her. It was a fleeting thought, a hope that drifted through my mind like a passing breeze, but I held on to it, as fragile as it was. The next day, I returned. But Luna wasn't alone anymore. As Luna rested beside me, the world seemed to slow down. The hustle of the city, the constant hum of technology, the distant whir of transport vehicles in the sky, all of it seemed to fade into the background, leaving just the two of us in this forgotten corner of the world. I wasn't sure why I felt such a pull to her. Maybe it was because of the purity in her eyes, the vulnerability that was too often seen in the eyes of children abandoned by the chaos of war. Or perhaps it was because I saw a reflection of myself in her, a lost soul, trying to make sense of a broken world. I sat there for what seemed like an eternity, but it was only a few minutes, I realized. My legs were beginning to ache, and the reality of the situation came crashing back. She was just a child in a dangerous city, and I had no idea how to help her. I couldn't take her home with me. I had no way to care for her. My life was as precarious as hers, filled with the constant need to fix things and keep moving forward, never stopping long enough to truly take stock of anything around me. But something about her, something in the quiet surrender of her gaze, made me want to break that pattern. I slowly rose to my feet, brushing the dirt from my clothes, and looked around. The alley seemed darker now, though the sun was still trying to make its way through the smog overhead. I knew I had to leave. She needed to rest, and I had no idea when she would wake up or where she would go. But I made a decision in that moment. "I'll be back," I promised softly. "Stay here. I'll bring something for you." I wasn't sure she understood, but she nodded anyway, clutching her stuffed animal to her chest once more. Her eyes were already closing, the weight of exhaustion finally taking over her tiny frame. I walked away, my heart heavy with the thought of leaving her alone in that dark, forgotten corner of the world. But I promised I would return. I would make sure she wasn't left alone. Chapter 2. The Return of the Mother. The next day, I returned with food, blankets, and what little supplies I could scrounge together from the few places I trusted. I wasn't sure what I expected, perhaps that Luna would be gone, or that she might have found some other place to hide, or worse, that something had happened to her in the hours I'd been away. But when I arrived, I found her exactly where I had left her, though she was no longer alone. Standing beside her was a woman tall, regal, and almost out of place in the rundown alley. She wore a long cloak that billowed behind her, and her face was partially obscured by a hood, but even from this angle, I could see the elegant sharpness of her features. There was something about her that didn't belong in a place like this. The aura around her felt different, as though she carried a weight far beyond the city's decay. Her presence felt powerful and ancient, and yet, her eyes, the same eyes Luna had, spoke of a deep, raw vulnerability that mirrored her daughter's. Luna looked up at me, a smile spreading across her face as she saw me approach. Her small hands reached out, grabbing onto my coat as she pulled herself up with more energy than she had shown the day before. "You came back. You came back," she said, her voice a mixture of joy and relief. The words, simple and sweet, melted something cold inside me. I had come back, and somehow that small gesture had already changed things. I turned my attention to the woman, who was now watching me with a quiet intensity. There was something in her gaze, something that held my attention, something I couldn't look away from. It wasn't a look of gratitude, at least not entirely. There was something else in her eyes, something that seemed to reach deep into my soul, as though she saw something in me that I hadn't even realized was there. "You're the one who helped her," the woman said, her voice smooth like velvet but edged with something unspoken, something heavy. She spoke with an air of authority, but there was a sense of vulnerability hidden in the undertone. "I'm grateful to you. More than you know." I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. "She needed help," I replied, my voice catching slightly. The weight of the situation was sinking in, and I realized that my actions were about to open doors I wasn't prepared to face. But it didn't matter anymore. I had made my choice, and in doing so, I had unwittingly tied myself to this woman and to her daughter in a way that would change everything. "I am Arya," the woman continued, her eyes now softening as she took a step closer. "And this is my daughter, Luna. I know I have no right to ask for your help, but please understand, you've given my daughter something I couldn't. You've given her hope when she had none." Her words hit me harder than I expected, and I found myself speechless. This wasn't a simple thank you. This was something else, something I didn't understand. Arya stepped even closer, her gaze never leaving mine, and I suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of her presence. There was something about her, something ancient and powerful, that stirred a deep and inexplicable reaction within me. For a moment, I was caught in a stillness that felt almost like time itself had stopped. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke again, her words carrying a weight I had not anticipated. "I know what you've done for my daughter, but please, there's more you can give. You've already shown her kindness, but now, I ask for something greater." Her words were laced with something deeper, something I wasn't sure how to interpret. I took a step back, my mind racing as I tried to piece together what she was saying. There was a part of me that wanted to reject it, to deny the strange pull she had on me, but I couldn't. Her presence, her power, it was undeniable. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice hoarse with confusion. Arya's eyes softened as she took another step closer. The air between us seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. "I beg of you, please," she said, her voice trembling slightly now, though her posture remained regal. "Become my husband. Marry me, and I swear on everything I am, I will give you a life beyond anything you've ever imagined. We will be free of this city, free of the war, free of everything that has bound us." I stood there, frozen. Her words felt surreal, impossible even. I had helped her daughter, yes, but this? This was something entirely different. Something I wasn't prepared for, something that shook the very foundation of my understanding of the world. "You're asking me to marry you?" The words barely left my mouth, as though I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Arya nodded, her expression earnest, her eyes pleading with something I couldn't yet understand. "I know it seems sudden, but I have nowhere else to turn. You saved Luna, and in doing so, you've saved me. I am bound to you now, just as Luna is. I can no longer live without you." The weight of her words settled on me, and I felt a shift in the air, as though the universe had just irrevocably changed. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think. But in that moment, as Luna clung to my leg and Arya stood before me, her eyes filled with a strange mix of hope and desperation, I realized that my life had just taken a turn I could never have predicted, and I had no idea where it was going to lead. I stood there, utterly speechless. Arya's words had caught me completely off guard. Marry her? It didn't make sense. I had helped her daughter, Luna, out of a moment of compassion, not for any expectation of reward or, especially, a proposal. But there she was, standing before me, with that unspoken weight in her eyes, as though everything in her world hinged on my response. Luna, sensing the tension in the air, reached up and tugged on my sleeve. You'll say yes, won't you? Her voice was soft, almost pleading, and when I looked down at her, I saw that same childlike innocence mixed with a fragile hope. She had no idea what kind of request her mother had just made, but I could see in her eyes that she wanted something more than just safety. She wanted the peace she'd never known. Arya's gaze followed Luna's, her eyes softening when she looked at her daughter. There was love in her gaze, but it was a quiet, desperate kind of love, one forged in the depths of their struggle, one that I couldn't yet understand. I don't expect you to understand, Arya said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. But Luna and we have been through things that you couldn't even begin to imagine. I'm not just asking for myself. I'm asking for Luna's future. She needs a protector, and I need someone to stand beside me. Someone who has shown that they can care. You've done that for her already. Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. They were raw and sincere, and they stirred something inside me, something I had buried deep within myself. The world I lived in, the one of rusted machines and broken hopes, had made me cynical. I had forgotten what it meant to truly trust someone, let alone to open up to them. But in that moment, standing before Arya and Luna, I felt an undeniable pull toward them both. I wanted to argue, to tell Arya that this was crazy, that I couldn't marry her just because I had helped her daughter. But something in her eyes, in the way she stood before me, unwilling to look away, made me pause. Maybe this wasn't about logic. Maybe it was about something far deeper, something I couldn't explain, but felt with every fiber of my being. I can't just marry you, I finally said, my voice hoarse. I don't even know you. I barely know Luna. I'm just a mechanic. I have nothing to offer. Arya's expression didn't falter. If anything, her eyes grew more determined. You're wrong, she replied quietly, almost too softly. You have everything to offer. More than you realize. Before I could respond, Luna tugged on my sleeve again. Please, she whispered. We don't have anyone else. I just want us to be safe. I don't want to lose you. And with that, the last of my resistance crumbled. It wasn't that I felt obligated or even fully understood what Arya was asking of me. It was simply that, in that moment, I saw the weight of her plea, the truth behind her words, and I couldn't ignore it. I'll think about it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a yes. But it was the only thing I could say. Arya nodded, as though she had expected nothing less. She stepped back slightly, her posture still regal despite the heaviness in the air. Take your time, she said. But know that our fate is intertwined now. In this city, in this world, there is no other choice. As the last of her words hung in the air, I felt an odd sense of finality settle over me. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew that whatever happened next, I was already on a path that I couldn't turn away from. Chapter 3. Unlikely Bonds. Days passed, but the question lingered like a shadow over everything I did. The request Arya had made, as absurd as it had seemed at first, had begun to take root in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just about a marriage proposal. It was about survival. The war had decimated everything. Cities, families, even entire civilizations. In a world like this, where everything was constantly shifting and changing, alliances were everything. And Arya wasn't asking for a typical marriage, she was asking for protection. She was asking for someone who could stand beside her in a world that cared nothing for their kind. I had been so consumed with my own survival that I never thought about what it meant to protect someone else. And yet, here was Luna, clinging to the hope that I could be the person who would provide that for her. I had never been a man who sought out relationships or connections. My life had been defined by machines and repairs, the hum of engines, and the clinking of tools. It had been a solitary existence, one I had grown accustomed to. But now, with Arya and Luna in my life, I couldn't ignore the pull to do something more, to offer something that went beyond fixing broken engines. The days turned into weeks, and during that time, Arya and Luna slowly became more and more a part of my life. Arya would visit me at the repair shop, bringing Luna with her. It was clear that she didn't want me to forget my promise, but she didn't pressure me either. She gave me space to make up my mind, though her presence seemed to grow larger with each passing day. There was something mesmerizing about her, a quiet strength that radiated from her, even in the face of the city's ruin. I spent more and more time with Luna, and it became harder to ignore the fact that, in my own small way, I had started to care for her. She wasn't just an orphan on the street anymore. She was someone I was responsible for, someone I had chosen to protect. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city's neon lights flickered to life, I found myself walking with Luna through the streets. We had just finished a small errand, one that I had promised her, a simple trip to the market for some food and supplies. We were walking back toward the dilapidated building where I lived when Luna looked up at me with that same innocent hope in her eyes. "Do you think we'll be safe now?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with uncertainty. I looked down at her, my hand resting on the back of her head in a gesture that felt more natural than I had anticipated. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but I'll do everything I can to make sure you are." She smiled up at me, a small but genuine smile, and I felt my heart tighten. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever came, I wouldn't face it alone. The next morning, I returned to the alley where I had first found Luna. I didn't expect Arya to be there, but when I saw her standing by the old wreckage of a ship, waiting for me, I knew that my decision had already been made. "I've thought about your offer," I said, my voice firm, though I could feel my pulse quicken. "And I can't promise everything you want. But I can promise this. I'll help you. I'll protect Luna. And I'll stand by you." Arya's gaze softened, a hint of relief in her eyes. She took a step toward me, and for the first time since we had met, I saw something that resembled hope in her expression. "You've already given me more than I could ever have imagined," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And that is more than enough." We stood there for a long time, the weight of what was to come heavy in the air. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I had a family now, and together, we would face whatever the future held. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change. I had made my choice, and though it wasn't the smoothest or easiest decision I had ever made, it was one I couldn't take back. The weight of Arya and Luna's presence in my life felt like a constant pressure on my chest, but it wasn't suffocating. Instead, it was grounding an anchor in a world that had long since drifted into chaos. In the weeks that followed, I found myself more entrenched in their world. Arya was no ordinary woman. Her quiet strength and determination were contagious. She moved through the world with grace and purpose, as though the weight of the universe rested on her shoulders, yet she carried it with an ease that seemed unnatural. She didn't talk much about her past, and I didn't press her for details. Whatever had happened before Luna and I had crossed paths was something that she was either too proud or too burdened to share. But I could see the traces of it in her, traces of a life that had been shaped by loss and survival. Luna, on the other hand, was still the innocent child she had been when I first found her. Her laughter had become a constant soundtrack to my life, and her wide eyes filled with wonder at the simplest things. A sky full of stars, the sight of an old ship being repaired, the taste of a simple meal shared between the three of us. I couldn't deny that my heart had grown attached to her, though I had never asked for this role of protector. It had simply fallen into place. I took Luna on little trips around the city when I could, showing her the places I used to go when I was younger, before everything had crumbled. We would walk through the quiet streets, passing by broken shops and long-abandoned buildings, talking about whatever came to mind. It was during one of these trips that Luna asked a question that stopped me dead in my tracks. "Will you marry Mama?" she asked, her voice so innocent that it stung. We had been walking in the city park, where a few tired trees still clung to life, and the distant hum of hovercars filled the silence. The question was simple, but the weight behind it was heavier than anything I had expected. I didn't know how to respond. The idea of marriage had always seemed foreign to me, something for those who had the luxury of peace, of stability. And yet, here I was, with Luna, standing in the middle of a war-ravaged city, caught between the promise I had made to Arya and my own reluctance to accept the reality of the situation. "I don't know," I replied, my voice strained. "It's not that simple." Luna didn't press the issue any further. She simply took my hand, her small fingers wrapping around mine, and we continued walking in silence. It was a silence that spoke volumes, though one filled with questions, unspoken promises, and a future that neither of us could yet define. As the days passed, I began to feel a shift in the way Arya and I interacted. We spent more time together, working side by side, repairing the wreckage of ships and machines that had been abandoned by the war. It was strange. My life had always revolved around mechanical work, but now, with Arya by my side, it felt like more. The silence between us was comfortable, though not without its tension. There were moments when I caught her watching me, her gaze lingering just a little too long, and I couldn't help but wonder if she was thinking about the same things I was. One night, after a particularly grueling day of work, Arya and I found ourselves sitting together in the small, dimly lit space I called home. The air was thick with the scent of metal and oil, and the low hum of the ship's engines in the background was the only sound. Luna had already gone to bed, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like it was just the two of us. Arya broke the silence first. "I didn't expect you to agree," she said softly, her eyes not meeting mine. "But I'm grateful that you did." I didn't respond immediately. My mind was still swirling with the events of the past few weeks, and I wasn't sure how to put everything into words. But after a long pause, I spoke, my voice quieter than usual. "I didn't agree to marry you," I said, the words coming out more bluntly than I intended. "I agreed to help. To protect you both. I'm not someone who makes promises lightly, and I don't want you to think that I'm doing this because of some obligation." Arya finally looked up at me, her expression unreadable, but I could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes. She didn't need to hear more. She knew exactly what I meant. There was no illusion between us. We both understood the unspoken contract we had entered into, one that wasn't bound by love, but by necessity, by survival. "I know," she replied, her voice steady. "And I don't expect you to do anything you don't want to. But I'm asking you to stay. To stay with us. Not out of pity, but because I need you. Luna needs you." The weight of her words settled in my chest, and for the first time, I felt the full impact of the decision I had made. It wasn't about fixing machines anymore. It wasn't about going through the motions of survival. It was about real lives, about the two people who had come into mine, whether I liked it or not. "I'll stay," I said, my voice firm now, as though the decision had finally been made for me. "But I can't promise anything more." Arya smiled, a small, fleeting smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but still held a warmth that was new. "That's all I'm asking for," she said softly. And in that moment, I knew that my life had irrevocably changed. It wasn't a simple choice. It wasn't a straightforward path, but it was the path I had chosen, whether I fully understood it or not. Chapter 4. The Path Forward. The days that followed felt like a blur of decisions, small victories, and unforeseen challenges. As I continued to help Arya and Luna rebuild their lives, the city outside seemed to grind on as it always had. But inside the small space we now shared, a fragile sense of hope began to take root. Arya and I continued our work together, and though there were moments of tension, of unspoken words between us, there were also moments of quiet companionship. We weren't the same as we had been when I first met them. We had evolved into something different, a unit, a team. I found myself waking up earlier, working longer hours, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Arya had a way of making even the most mundane tasks seem meaningful. Luna, too, had become a constant presence in my life, her laughter filling the quiet spaces in ways I hadn't realized I needed. One evening, as I was finishing up a repair on a damaged transport ship, I looked up to find Arya standing in the doorway, watching me. The way she stood there, silent and still, made my heart skip a beat. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice quiet but insistent. I set down my tools and wiped my hands on a rag, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment. "About what?" She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine as though she were looking for something, some answer, some assurance. "About us. About what happens next." I could feel the shift in the air, the tension that had been building between us, finally breaking. I didn't know what she was asking, but I knew one thing. Whatever came next, I wasn't going to face it alone. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very atmosphere had sensed the shift between us. I set down the tools I had been fiddling with and turned to face Arya. She stood there, in the dim light of the shop, her face unreadable, yet somehow open, vulnerable, even. Her posture was stiff, as if she had been carrying the weight of a question for too long, and now, she was finally ready to ask it. I took a step toward her, my boots echoing in the silence of the room. What happens next? I asked softly, almost more to myself than to her. The question felt heavy, though, laden with everything we hadn't said yet. Aria's gaze softened, her eyes filling with a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. She seemed to gather her thoughts for a moment before speaking, the words coming slowly, almost cautiously. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, her voice low but steady. About how you agreed to protect Luna and me, but not because you had to. You said you didn't want to promise anything more. She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor for a brief moment, as though weighing the significance of her next words. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. I wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but I knew it was important. The tension between us had grown, and I could feel it in my bones. The question of our future, my future with them, had been hanging in the air ever since I had agreed to help. I want to make sure you understand something, Aria said, her voice firm now, but still soft. I never wanted to pressure you. I never wanted to ask something of you that wasn't your choice. But I also know that what you and I have is more than just a chance encounter. You've done more for Luna and me than anyone else ever has. And I know that maybe, just maybe, we've become more than just strangers in this world. I felt my heart race as she spoke, the weight of her words sinking deep into my chest. She was right. We had become more than just people passing through each other's lives. But what did that mean? What did it mean for me, for Luna, for Aria? Could I live with the responsibility of what it would take to be more than a protector? Could I give them more than just my help? Aria took a step closer to me, her eyes never leaving mine. I'm not asking for your love, she said quietly, but firmly. I'm asking for your commitment. A commitment to stay with us, to build something together. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that without you, Luna and I wouldn't have survived this long. And I want you to be part of our lives. Not out of obligation, but because you want to. Her words struck me deeply, and I could feel something shift within me. It wasn't about love or promises of a perfect future. It was about the simple, undeniable truth that I had already made a choice. The choice wasn't just about staying with them. It was about building something that had been broken for so long, something worth fighting for. I nodded slowly, the weight of everything settling on my shoulders. I can't promise the perfect life, I said, my voice rough. I can't promise that everything will be easy. But I'm here. For you and for Luna. I'm here to stay. Aria's face softened, and I saw the relief flood her eyes. She reached out then, her hand gently brushing against mine, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. It was just the two of us, standing there, the weight of everything we had faced together finally settling into something I couldn't explain. Something real. Epilogue. A new beginning. Months passed, and though life wasn't perfect, it was ours. Aria, Luna, and I had found a rhythm in the chaos of the city, working together to repair ships, rebuild lives, and navigate the unpredictable world we inhabited. Every day brought new challenges, but also small victories. We learned to rely on each other in ways I hadn't anticipated. Luna's laughter filled our small home, and Aria and I, though still getting to know each other in ways neither of us had expected, found comfort in the quiet moments we shared. It wasn't the kind of love I had imagined for myself, but it was real. It was built on something solid: trust, sacrifice, and the understanding that sometimes the most unexpected bonds are the strongest. I no longer thought of myself as just a mechanic, a man lost in the remnants of a broken city. I had become something more. A protector, a father figure, a partner. And while the world outside was still uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone anymore. Aria had given me something I didn't know I needed. And in return, I had given her and Luna a chance at something better. Together, we would face whatever the future held. And for the first time in my life, that future didn't seem so frightening.